spend time talking about empathy fatigue, right? Where you just give and give and give and give so much that you burn yourself out. And this shows up especially in certain situations, people in leadership, right? Because you're dealing with large groups of people, because you're trying to help navigate really complex emotional situations. People in healthcare, you're dealing with very high-level emotional situations. People in education. Anytime you're dealing with large groups of people, you can run afoul of empathy fatigue. But what if these people aren't burning out because they care too much? What if they're actually burning out because they're navigating constant emotional complexity without boundaries and without replenishment? Let's back this up and talk about these just a little bit. Because I think it's important to understand that empathy fatigue isn't something that we have no control over. We have a choice. Anybody who's listened to me or read my book or listened to my podcast knows I am very firm on the fact that having empathy does not mean you don't have boundaries. If you give and give and give and give until there's nothing left, you haven't set good boundaries in place. And not to be rough about it, but that's nobody's fault but yourself. Boundaries are imperative to have, especially when you're dealing with groups that are going to tax a lot of empathy. And one of these boundaries that we can put into place is being able to understand the difference between affective or emotional empathy and cognitive empathy. When it reaches a point as a leader, as an educator, as someone in medicine, that you just cannot give that much of yourself anymore, that's when you flip the switch to be able to use cognitive empathy, that I logically understand what you're going through. I logically understand the implications of this situation. I logically understand what this could mean for this group of people, but I'm not feeling it. I know it's old and really cliched, but we hear you can't pour from an empty glass, right? But it's true. You can't help others if you've got nothing to give. So if you are someone that cares a lot, if you are someone that really wants to help people, that really wants to be able to dig in and give, don't give so much that you're tapped out, because then you have nothing to give. And you've run contrary to what it is that you want to do. Boundaries are incredibly important. And it's not something that you should just put up in the moment. It's something that you need to think about. Where is too far? This is really important because we talk a lot about empathy fatigue, especially right now, but it isn't the empathy that's burning you out. I think I've told this story before, but I used to work for a medical facility specifically for someone who was a reproductive specialist. And about half of what his job was working with patients who were trying to conceive. And it's really complex, and there can be a lot of reasons why couples aren't able to conceive. But the emotionality of that job was high. And the institution that I was in had no empathy. This place was devoid of empathy, which you'd think for a big medical facility that maybe they would have had some, but they didn't. The doctor I worked with was great. The group that he was in, not so much. So over time, partially because of the lack of empathy in this facility, and partially because of the high emotional toll that the patients took on me, I did burn out. I had empathy fatigue bad. But that was nobody's fault but my own. I was young enough that I didn't understand how to put up boundaries and not give so much of myself that there wasn't anything left to give. It's hard when you have empathy to be able to put those boundaries up, but you have to take care of yourself first. Again, the old adage about, put your own oxygen mask on before you put it on for the person next to you. Which also brings us back to self-empathy. When these sorts of things happen, where you end up with empathy fatigue, where you end up with this empathy burnout, you have to begin with a little self-reflection and self-awareness. This isn't working. Yeah, maybe I think I'm doing the right things and I'm helping people, but I'm not. Through this self-reflection and self-awareness, you can lead to self-empathy and be able to say, these boundaries are actually a healthy thing. I have to be able to take care of myself first so that I can take care of everybody else. And that's not being selfish, and that's not withholding myself. That's not anything that I'm doing wrong. I have to give myself this empathy, what I'm feeling for myself, and the connection and understanding with myself, so that I can show myself self-compassion, the action that goes along with empathy. And that compassion is to put up the boundaries that you need. For those of you in leadership positions, now is an especially trying time. I mean, I think we could probably say that all the way through history, but with some of the social climate of things that are happening, some of the friction between generations, some of the friction with AI, living in a technological culture, we're navigating things in leadership that we've never really seen before, much less all at once. It's a lot of emotional complexity. Self-reflection leads to self-awareness, leads to self-empathy. Through self-empathy, we can show self-compassion, which can help us avoid burnout by putting up the boundaries that we need. That lack of reflection also leads to a lack of recovery. If you go out and you run a marathon, you don't expect your body to be able to just do the same thing the next day without any kind of recovery. But we send our leaders in to these same complex emotional places day after day after day after day and expect them to do it over and over again. We have this weird idea that, or at least in our society, that if there isn't a physical manifestation of something, then it wasn't damaging. It wasn't painful. It didn't cause problems.